In case you haven't heard, this fall is going to be completely insane when it comes to new PC hardware. There's going to be new offerings from Nvidia, Intel, and AMD. All of the big three companies in the space are going to have some pretty big product launches. So let's run down each company's prospects. Starting with Nvidia, this year, the time will be right for their RTX 40 series of GPUs to be announced and released, and rumor has it, these cards are going to be hot and heavy. According to some of the latest credible leaks, the upcoming RTX 4090 could draw up to 600 watts of power, which puts even the current RTX 3090 Ti to shame. If this turns out to be true, this would certainly be in line with Nvidia's strategy the last couple of release cycles. Want more performance? Throw more power at it, and over-engineer a cooler to compensate. But, honestly, I'm not complaining. More to the design of the alleged 4090, according to Igor's lab, its board has some design cues from the 3090 Ti, which indicates the 3090 Ti was a tangible proof of concept for the upcoming 40 series. As for the rest of the 40 series, they will all be using Nvidia's new Lovelace architecture, and I would assume you could expect a similar power draw bump across the entire line of 40 series cards. As for performance, a lot of people are thinking we'll probably get the same generational performance bump of around 50%, again, in exchange for much higher power draw. Which, hey, at least things aren't becoming stagnant in the GPU space. Coming to pricing is where things are a bit harder to pin down. While Nvidia kept the same pricing from the 20 series to the 30 series, we're certainly not in normal times. And if what Nvidia's CFO teased is true, and the 30 series will be selling parallel to the 40 series in order to aid with supply issues, Nvidia could be feeling a bit greedy, and instead of price cutting the 30 series, instead choose to price the 40 series above where the 30 series clocked in at. Only time will tell in this regard. We could reasonably expect these cards to be announced and released in September or October. Briefly talking strategy, if you're in the market for a new GPU right now, or just in general new system, while supply issues have just about alleviated for the 30 series cards, I would advise waiting for the 40 series to release before pulling the trigger on a graphics card, because worst case scenario, and Nvidia decides to be greedy, you could at least find used 30 series cards at a little bit of a discount from people trying to sell it off to fund a shiny new 40 series card. And that'll pretty much do it for Nvidia, as they are a GPU company, and that's kind of all they do, at least for now, which is unlike Intel. Intel is at least guaranteed to announce and release their 13th gen CPUs, also referred to as Raptor Lake. Raptor Lake will be the iterative successor to Alder Lake, Intel's current 12th gen CPUs. And keeping in line with the tick-tock release cycle, Raptor Lake will use the same LGA 1700 socket as Alder Lake. So if you have a 12th gen processor and want some upgrade without having to switch your platform, then the 13th gen might be something to keep your eye on. Buyer beware though, due to Intel utilizing both efficiency, low performance cores, and performance, high performance cores, 12th gen and onward pretty much require using Windows 11, as its CPU core scheduler is much better equipped to make use of efficiency and performance cores found in the latest Intel processors. Although if you'd like a video better explaining the new core layouts, make sure you're subscribed. So if you've yet to make the jump to Windows 11, I would probably hold off on grabbing a new Intel CPU. However, Raptor Lake might not be the only CPU Intel has to show later this year. The streets have allegedly spotted a new Raptor Lake-based Intel Xe chip. If you don't know, Intel Xe, or Extreme Edition, is/was Intel's HEDT, high-end desktop offering that's been dormant for several years. Essentially the equivalent of Threadripper. These processors are sort of an in-between between consumer and enthusiast chips and server chips. Anyhow, supposedly another iteration of Extreme Edition has been spotted, and will be lined up for a fall release. These things have historically been announced at Computex, which generally takes place at the end of May in Taiwan. Which, by the way, total goals to visit one day. Anyway, we can generally expect Intel to announce or just tease the Raptor Lake CPUs from desktop to HEDT at Computex in the summer. Intel isn't just stopping at CPUs though. You might remember at the end of March, Intel announced and paper launched their new Arc GPUs. Well, kind of. If you'd like a full recap of what happened, you can check out our video here. But to put it in short, Intel disappointed because all they detailed and paper launched were their laptop GPUs, with a small teaser of their desktop GPUs at the end. and the paper launch was kind of a shit show, to say the least. The one notebook that was available quote-unquote immediately with a new ARC GPU was a Samsung laptop, which was only available in South Korea for a couple of weeks post-announcement due to a miscommunication between Samsung and Intel. However, most signs are pointing to Intel actually launching their desktop GPUs earlier than the fall, so either late Q2 or early Q3. So it will be a bit earlier than fall, but in all honesty, due to supply constraints as well as possible price cuts caused by other GPUs launching in the fall, it might be in your best interest to wait to pick up a new ARC GPU. As for what we can expect for performance from the ARC GPUs, we think they should all fall into the mid-range based on power and TDP numbers that we know. So Intel might not have high-end offerings, but they'll have something that caters to the vast majority of people wanting to build a gaming PC, still making them competitive with Nvidia and AMD. And that will finally bring us to AMD. It's all but guaranteed AMD will launch the 6th Gen Ryzen, the 6000 series of processors late summer/early fall, which, once again, expect at least a teaser at Computex. The 6th Gen Ryzen will feature the Zen 3 Plus architecture, as well as officially marking AMD's move to the new AM5 socket. AMD has stuck with the AM4 socket since the release of 1st Gen Ryzen in 2017, and at the time, AMD said AM4 would be sticking around until at least 2020. So here we are, in 2022, 5 years later, and AMD is just now moving to a new socket, which is impressive, to say the least. So it's hard to complain about AMD finally switching sockets when Intel makes you switch every couple of releases. As for performance, perhaps the biggest gains AMD will make is in clock speed frequency. That's something AMD has always lagged behind Intel in, but nonetheless has still remained highly competitive with their performance. Current rumors point to 6th Gen Ryzen getting up to 5 GHz out of the box, without manual overclocking, so it's nice to see AMD catch up in this regard. As a brief aside, it seems like both Intel and AMD are starting to opt for more frequency out of the box, reducing the overhead you have to manually overclock. On one hand, it's nice for manufacturers to try and give you the most performance as possible straight away, but on the other, it kills the tinkering side of me. Moving on, it will also be interesting to see if AMD iterates with a new 3D V-Cache processor on 6th Gen Ryzen. Just a couple weeks ago, AMD released their Ryzen 7 5800X3D, featuring this new cache technology. Basically, AMD stacks the cache dies on top of each other in order to provide more of it. It was still somewhat experimental tech, but kudos to AMD for throwing it out there on a consumer-grade chip. The 5800X3D boasted some performance gains, but was limited in its clock speed in order to ensure stability. But the technology does look promising, so it will be interesting to see if AMD iterates upon it during 6th Gen again. But AMD might not be done with processors yet. Much like Intel's Extreme Edition, AMD is also rumored to have a refreshed Threadripper in the works. Things like core count aren't exactly known yet, but it will most likely be based on the Zen 3 architecture. Threadripper is AMD's HEDT offering, directly competing with Intel's Extreme Edition. And depending on who you ask, the reason why Extreme Edition has been absent the last few years could be because it just simply couldn't compete with AMD's Threadripper, so we'll just have to wait and see. Moving on to GPUs, AMD will also be set to release their RX 7000 graphics cards in the fall. These new cards will be based on their new RDNA 3 architecture, and driver patches for Linux have already been spotted out in the wild. So their release is all but confirmed. So far, there have only been references to 4 SKUs of the 7000 series, one of which is an integrated GPU, while the other 3 are discrete. AMD unfortunately has fallen behind GPU competition as they've been focusing on Ryzen for the last few years, but the current RX 6000 GPUs showed some promise and were competitive in the low to mid range, falling just short on the high end. But hey, more GPUs out on the market will be a fantastic thing, especially in this economy where GPUs have been really hard to come by. So all in all, this fall is going to be insane. We'll have new processors from AMD and Intel, as well as GPU offerings from Intel, AMD, and Nvidia. I, for one, am really excited for all the new hardware coming out later this year. Let us know down in the comments below which hardware you're most excited about, and I'll see you guys next time.